Yeah, that is a great question. I've had more questions about that this weekend, so that's been a lot of fun. Okay, so basically, in my opinion, when I read the scriptures, I understand that this broken state, this corrupted state that we're all in, that causes so many problems and so many headaches, that's the one we're most familiar with, especially as Christians. We understand that we've been redeemed from that. But that's not the way God originally created us. And so when Jesus forgives us and then we begin to nurture that new life in the Word, He's actually moving us back toward the person we were always intended to be. And if you look up the definition of healing, that's generally how it will be in a dictionary. It'll be laid out that it's some sort of mending, it's some sort of restoration. It's going back to the way things were meant to be. So our souls need some healing. They need some mending, and we can't do that outside the relationship to Jesus and then nurturing that relationship through the Word. And so each of us, the research is showing that Christians are not especially adept at actually getting into their Word every day. So we're missing our healing. We're skipping it. We're forfeiting the healing of being in the Word, and I want to help people get in the Word and find their healing. So in order to do that, we have to feed ourselves the truth. The truth is our soul food. And so we have to get good. We can't just be dependent on our parents or our preachers. We have to learn to feed ourselves the truth every day. Thus, I created the online persona of the spoon-fed soul. I think it was actually a couple different things all happening at the same time. So I was raising my children and deliberately raising them intentionally to be Christians, and yet I saw that the world had shifted and changed so much from when I was their age. The kinds of things that I did naturally as a kid, going to youth group, going to church, hanging with my mom, having conversations with my mom from sometimes that were irritating because she would be almost unbendable. You know, this is the way things are. And I would, of course, think that I was being, that she was just being strict or overbearing or unfair. And then I would hear all the other parents saying the same thing. No, this is what God says. This is what God teaches. Your mom's just holding the line. Your mom's just giving you a Christian worldview, right? But then when I started raising kids and I was having conversations with my kids and their parents, I was pretty much the only one that was speaking certain Christian truths into my kids' lives. I couldn't count on the rest of the world. I couldn't count on their teachers or their friends' parents to hold the same standards, to have the same ideas, and it all began to be a little looser and a little more uncertain than I was actually comfortable with. And so I began to think, okay, so how do I teach my kids in the middle of all these other voices that they hear? How do I convince them I'm actually telling them the truth? Because I didn't have the kind of backup that my mom did. Everybody just sort of agreed that the Bible was true and God existed and Jesus was the only way to heaven, and those things were just not up for debate. And so when I began to see that changing, that was kind of one little aspect that got me thinking about how do I make Christianity obvious? How do I make it convincing to my kids? That sort of thing. And then I got involved in a church that there was a whole lot of uncertainty even within the church as to what was really true and what the gospel really meant and who Jesus really was. And I was really shocked from time to time to see the numbers of people that were attending that church and couldn't answer basic questions. They weren't totally sure. And I thought, oh my goodness, if we in the church can't come together on what the truth is, how in the world are we supposed to teach it to people outside the church and to the next? How do we officially pass it on to our children if we're not even in agreement inside the church? So that was bothersome. And then also at the same time, my husband was taking some theological classes and he thought that I should check into them. And so I looked through them and realized they didn't seem interesting to me. And for some reason, I don't even know why. Well, I do. It was providence. I kept Googling and I bumped into Biola's Apologetics program. And when I looked at the list of the classes, I was like, this is what I've been looking for. And so the last thing I needed to do was to get another degree, but I clicked the submit button anyway. And 3 years later, I had an apologetics degree. I do, actually. I've become really fond of Francis Schaeffer. And I really love the fact that he connects everything to origins. If God does not exist, then there are certain things about human life as we know it that simply shouldn't be the way that they are. It just doesn't make sense. But if he does exist and he's telling us the truth, then because we are finite and limited, we do not have to live with all the question marks and the uncertainty of life. And isn't that something that we all struggle with? Who am I? What's going on in my life? What can I really count on? Those kinds of things. If God is there and he's telling the truth about the world that he created, the material aspects, the immaterial aspects, the moral aspects, if he is telling us the truth, then we in our limited, finite minds can still have direct access to the truth of the fabric of reality as we know it, as we live it. And that just, to me, that's awfully valuable in a circumstance, in our limited human frailty, to be able to know that we have a direct access to truth. That is incredibly valuable. And the fact that it explains life as we know it, that just makes sense. Other worldviews can explain the aspects of life like the biblical worldview can, and I think that speaks for itself. That's a good question. I do think it comes out a lot for me, and I really love the idea of discipleship, of personal discipleship, obviously. And so I find that there are an awful lot of implications that can also be applied to our personal life with God. So if he really did sacrifice himself for us, then we never have to live a day where we question if we're loved or not, because it's already been demonstrated. It's already on the table for us. All we have to do is recognize it. And not only is that love a good love, it's the source of everything. It's a limitless love. And if he would do that for us, what is he not capable and willing to do for us? So I think that's really important. So I think through a lot of the implications with regard to our personal discipleship. If he is a good God, if he died for us, then there's obviously a standard for our behavior of right and of wrong. Well, although sometimes that can seem ominous and overbearing, that also means we have a just God, that those people who for whatever reasons did not get any kind of an adverse consequence for the way they lived their lives, God is someday going to right every wrong, and that is a hope. He is building a life, a day for us when we can live without all the evil and without all the sin, and he's going to make it all right. If we don't have that, we have no hope. There's no hope for the future. There's nothing to take away the sting of today if there's no hope in tomorrow. So I think the implications for God's character and for the fact that he loves us and that we are desired and wanted, those meet our human needs way more than I can imagine anything else, any other worldview, any other system, because it's all based on this wonderful, restorative, transformative love of God. I try to take all the implications. If this is true, then that is true. And so that helps me, I think, to relate to people on just an everyday kind of human level, because we're all searching for love and acceptance and welcome, and with the Father, we already have it.